Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, 𝐈𝐫𝐢𝐬𝐻. I'm joined today by 𝐂𝐻EMID O'Calla. 𝐂𝐻EMID was one of the principal organisers of a demonstration for truth and civil rights that took place in Dublin last Saturday. The demonstration, in essence, was a demonstration of criticism of the government response and indeed media and societal response to the COVID pandemic. 𝐂𝐻EMID was one of the principal organisers, but has been campaigning vigorously around the country for over a year at least in relation to challenging the standard narrative and the impact that the COVID regulations is having on personal rights and freedoms, and as well as that, the reasoning and the logic or lack of behind some of the COVID regulations that have been put in place. So I invited 𝐂𝐻EMID on to talk about the protest last Saturday, but also about developments since, such as the masking of our children at school, and also what's coming in the future, and in terms of a people's response, what is being planned for the future as well. So I'd like to thank 𝐂𝐻EMID for joining us. 𝐂𝐻EMID, are you there?
Thank you, 𝐸. That's a good introduction anyway. Yes, I mean, people responded in huge numbers last Saturday in Dublin, as we expected they would. I mean, in the weeks leading up to it, there was a buzz. People appreciated, I think, the approach that we put out there, which was a principled one, that we're standing for truth, not a small thing, and standing for fundamental civil rights. We're not out there as anti-vaxxers or anything of that kind. In fact, we welcome people openly who have taken vaccines. We respect their choice, and our position is we want our choice to be respected equally, and that's the basis. I think that's the democratic approach to things. Grown people have the right to make their own decisions without coercion. And I think I was very enthused by last Saturday. There was a fabulous panel of speakers, ranging from teachers, down to social activists, mothers, students, somebody in the hospitality trade and so on. It was an impressive presentation, and I think people appreciated that. The feedback is still coming, and one of the things we did on Saturday was we launched also a new website which the campaign has established, and it's very appropriately named civilrights.ie. And like literally hundreds and hundreds of people, we haven't been able to keep up with the number of people who are registering on that site on an ongoing basis. And we also have in place a system of SMS text registration that people can text the word truth to 51444 and give us their name and what country they're in, and that way they're in the loop and they'll be informed and updated as campaign develops around the country, which is we're encouraging.
We'll come back to that, because I think that deserves a specific section in this discussion in itself, and I think we should remind people at the end as well, because we at the 𝐸𝐾ampus Media, and I as an individual, and I'm sure yourself, have people asking us, what do we do with our kids being masked at school, for instance, and things like that. So people are really seeking some kind of a connectivity at a local level with other parents and other individuals, to even just have somebody to talk to and to vent to at this stage. But we will come back to that. But I just want to stay focused on last Saturday just for a few more minutes, if you don't mind. What was the media response to what was without a doubt the largest gathering of people in Ireland since this pandemic began, challenging the government response? So what was the media response? Are they accepting that there seems to be a change, a zeitgeist developing?
Well, I was actually surprised in that RTE gave the event a mention and showed a small few seconds of video, and I know some of the other print media gave what I thought are not bad reports. They understated the attendance, but they did report the basic position of the speakers in defense of the right to choice, informed consent, and so on. So it was unusual, because the media, as you know, have been vilifying anybody who has stood up in this cause for the last 2 years, really, and they've been condemned and dismissed and slandered as all kinds of things. But that seems to have reduced. It didn't happen as much last week. Now, maybe that was the approach of the event, or maybe media pundits themselves are seeing that actually there is an issue here. And of course, that there is an issue is proven by the number of people who took part.
What is your estimation, Diarmuid, of how many people were involved?
I think not 20, but between 15 and 20,000, I think, is a fair estimation of it. Someone did a kind of a grid analysis of the image of O'Connell Street and worked out a density, which I think is reasonable. So I would say in excess of 15,000, close to 20.
Okay, and later on in this interview, we're going to talk about plans to expand those numbers, if possible, into the new year. As more and more people, I think the penny drops with them, that there's just something not right about many aspects of the government pandemic response, and things that just are not making sense, and things that we're being denied the right to information on and to make decisions on. So you're happy enough about the coverage of the protest. I'd like to maybe widen out that discussion about the mainstream media in relation to their overall attitude towards the COVID narrative, the state narrative about COVID, and anybody who's challenging that narrative. How do you feel that the mainstream media have performed in relation to that?
Well, abominably. I mean, we have been conducting, if you like, a separate media campaign for the last 3 or 4 months at least, and going to local radio stations and print media and so on, because they have, and we know that the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland actually gave them money to carry the government agenda. So, and some of their own trade associations for the radio broadcasters, for example, have admitted that most of their members actually would not be liquid. They wouldn't be able to trade, they wouldn't be able to trade anymore, but for the government subsidy. But in return for that subsidy, I think they've really done something shameful, which is they've taken local media or local radio away from its area, which is to address the local people and the local community. And instead, they've just become bleating sources of government propaganda. And there hasn't been open debate. There hasn't been challenges for good or for evil. I mean, what we've said from the very beginning is, look, if you think we're mad and we have nothing sensible to say, well, bring us on and expose us then for the charlatans that you say we are. But no, the debate isn't allowed, and that is a big lacking for any society that aspires to democracy at any level. We must have open debate, and people must be able to air their questions, and be they, you know, with a foundation or otherwise. If they're sincerely held questions, they need to be debated, and especially on something so profound that affects every aspect of Irish society. I mean, and this is still, it's increasing its impact actually. Family life, friendships, relationships, businesses, culture, everything is impacted hugely by this. And to not have organized proper public debate on this question is completely wrong. It is not, it's not democratic. And for journalists locally or nationally in the mainstream media to not see that and not address that issue is irresponsible grossly, and they have done a disservice.
You mentioned funding there that was officially given, and that can be traced right back and linked, and the paper trail is there and it's public.
Yeah, but it's public on the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland. I think by now they've had 4 tranches, if you like, of funding rounds, and they would have listed out all the radio stations, for example, who have received money, in some cases 250 or 300,000 euros.
Would you agree that there's also an element of self-censorship, which may be at least partly the result of a fear, because there has been a particular viciousness in relation to people who've challenged the COVID narrative or the state narrative of COVID, and an attack on people who are making challenges and quite often using reason and logic to do so. And I think there's an element, there may be fiscal or financial benefits put out there, but would you agree that there's also a fear, that the fear factor for a lot of people who want to have a career is very, very real at this stage?
I think it is, and particularly in journalism, it seems to be that if you want to get along, you better toe the line. And that's seen throughout. It's not necessarily a new concept, but people, if they want to develop their career and get the top jobs and the transfers that they want, they have to be seen to be ball players and not maverick. And
I think at this stage, it's even if they want to just get a job, full stop.
Full stop. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a lot of these people, of course, work on a contract basis as well, and you know, so that their livelihood is at stake. So government has done whether it be good or bad, they have done a job of spending their money to ensure the leveraging of their particular message. And it did, for example, this same thing was an issue, and it went to the Supreme Court a few years ago during the referendum on children, where I think, if that's the right one I'm thinking of, where the Supreme Court ruled that the state had spent its money on a one-sided argument, and that it was wrong having done so, because it was influencing public opinion in a referendum. And so they've done the very same thing on this issue. They've not allowed an alternative narrative, almost to a point that it's childlike, the position they have presented, and we're not allowed to challenge it. No one challenges it.
One thing that is really standing out now, and we might as well move on to this subject matter, is the masking of school children. And I would have thought that if and when it would come to this point, that there would have been at least a section of the mainstream media willing to stand up and be heard at this stage. It doesn't seem to be the case. What response have you got from the people that you're linked in with in the public in relation to this masking?
There's been outrage as the reality of these measures for kids in third class upwards having to be masked, and 5-year-olds being targeted for jabs and so on. There's been an overwhelming outcry from parents to say no, and to the extent that, as I think you know, there's an event organised publicly on outside Leinster House on Merrion Square tomorrow for that, because of huge demand. It wasn't something that was planned even a week ago, but people have been so outraged. I think this may be the straw, if you like, that breaks the camel's back, because it's a push too far. Like, our children are a line in the sand. We can't cross that. They need to be protected. And
do you want to just give an official plug now to that event tomorrow, just to give the details to people?
That event, I'd say it's going to be a massive event. Parents are invited to take a day off work, take their children out of school, and get to Merrion Square side of Leinster House for midday. And there's going to be a rally there. There'll be teachers, psychotherapists, professionals who will address this issue of child safety and where this legislation stands and what people's rights are. So people should come out and bring their family with them, because this is a concern for everybody. We must try to stop this in its tracks before it takes off. And I know there have been local events take place at different schools and school gates where parents have insisted that their children be unmolested, if you like, going into school and not forced or coerced into wearing masks. And we've heard reports of children coming out crying and all kinds of stuff. It's actually frightening to think that someone feels that they should do this to children. Like, have we not learned any lessons on the abuse of kids in schools?
We have two 10-year-olds in my house, and I was surprised last night at their worry and concern about the potential to have to wear masks today. The reports I have back, not just in those instances, but also beyond that particular school, is that there are children not wearing masks in the classrooms and that they are not being molested at the moment by their teachers. So I'm not saying that's in all instances, but I have had reports back that that has happened in numerous classrooms. And I personally would like to applaud the teachers for not taking it out on children, because some parents have spoken to in the last couple of days have said that they believe that this is the road towards complete 100% vaccination of school children, and that they want to make the school environment so uncomfortable that people will eventually say, oh, let's just do it. And again, there's no reasoning. I think one of the issues, and just for anybody who maybe is watching this and doesn't know why people might have a gripe with the wearing of masks, one of the elephants in the room, there seems to be a zoo developing around us at the moment in terms of the number of animals, elephants and giraffes and rhinoceri. Is it rhinoceri in the room? One of the elephants in the room with regard to the mask in classrooms is that the evidence is there that it was really of no benefit. That the wearing a mask in a room for a whole day, in which you're in that room for the whole day, has little to no benefit. Most of the studies are coming out and saying between
no benefit
and
It's no benefit to
8%
adults.
reduction in risk. You know, so in itself, it seems to be a control measure, or trying to create an environment in which people feel like they're doing something, even though that doing something is actually probably having a more negative effect than a positive effect. Well, where do you think this is going with the masks and kids?
I feel like, I think the scientific argument on the masks is a done deal. There is no benefit from them. And in fact, there are countless reports showing the dangers that long-term wearing of masks carry. So there's no debate there. They shouldn't be used or imposed. But I suppose, like for adults, the mask is like a symbol of compliance. And following that, as you say, is the vaccine. And they have said that they want to target 5-year-old kids with this, even though those children present they're in no danger of contracting this. Amongst any sector of the population, they're the freest and healthiest people, so they shouldn't be injected. And the notion that they should be jabbed to protect somebody else, that's an alien concept in medical treatment, that you must take some procedure to protect somebody else.
One significant study did in fact show that young boys, I think between the age of 8 and 15, when they were getting vaccinated against COVID, the likelihood of them being hospitalized due to the actual process of vaccination itself and myocarditis was far greater. I think it was something like 6 times greater than the likelihood of them being hospitalized due to COVID itself. So just it's not a following of science, and that's one of the real problematics here, that in so many instances there's regulations that are being introduced and it's very hard to tell why. And I think it will take a program in itself for you and I to speculate why this is happening. But in terms of the parents, because I've been asked by a lot of people, I'm sure you've been asked by a hell of a lot more, asking what do we do? What do we actually do at this stage? Because it's new for so many people. What I have responded with thus far is that if you can get to know other parents at the same school, and instead of feeling on your own, going on your own with your kid and potentially being refused, organizing for you as a group of parents at 8:45 in the morning or whatever time suits to meet at a particular gate, meet the principal or the vice principal, who'll have a register to take if they're not letting your kids in, and if they are letting your kids in, will there be no, but to do it with an email and collectively, so parents are not feeling so alone. Because that's what I'm getting from people, that parents need a bit of guidance and they're feeling alone at the moment. What do you think about that?
Isolation is our enemy, really. And that's exactly what people have been doing. In fact, some parents I know have stood outside the school gates, some with leaflets, some with a little sign, to protect the children. And they've made connections. And they were there today for a second day, for example, I know. And that is how it begins, is be visible. It's the business of being hidden and have your concerns and your objection hidden. That's our enemy, because people are afraid to step forward. But when one person says stop and stands up, then others get courage from that. And that's what's needed. People need to do that and keep doing it. And I know some parents who have actually taken their children out of school, because in some cases, and I should hope it's a rare thing, but in some cases, staff have been quite bullying to insist that kids put on a mask. So I know kids have been taken out of school, and but that's a serious consideration. Do you leave your children in there in an abusive environment? Now, the horrible thing, of course, is that a lot of parents are caught with work and they don't have alternative minding facilities. So maybe grannies and granddads can roll in. I know that's what we're doing. So but people need to do that. And
even for the parents who can't find a fix around it, I suppose it's worthwhile letting them know that even if you did bend, as it were, because you had no choice in the matter in this one, that doesn't mean that you have to give up all your principles, and that there is a campaign building, and it seems to be really taking on steam and taking on energy now, and to get involved in that campaign and not to feel defeated or deflated if you have been forced into facilitating a mask for your child in school.
Yeah, I mean, people should take courage. There is a campaign building. quite rapidly, and it will continue that way. And it can be victorious. I mean, we have won battles against government dictate before. Now, and even last week, for example, a petition handed into Rotunda Hospital resulted in they changing their position, whereby they had rules that fathers must have a COVID certificate going in with their expectant partner for childbirth. So they've reversed that now, and they're not insisting anymore, because the question was highlighted and the science was questioned, because there is no science. I mean, people who are vaccinated, we all know, government even admits it, they can contract viruses and they can transmit viruses in the very same way, and maybe even more so than those who are not vaccinated. So people need to look at the value of this and question, is there a value actually? And you need to weigh up the risk, because there certainly is risk. Another matter, which of course has not been debated in a proper manner, because there are significant risks and significant numbers of people who are suffering adverse reactions to these jabs.
Yeah, and I think it's gone up 1,000-fold to the VAERS system for measuring that in the United States for a start, and that's and again for another discussion. I think another elephant in the room is ivermectin. Now, I understand that studies began, or the 5 major hospitals in the Irish Republic joined a study beginning in November 5th to give ivermectin to their patients and that are in ICU that have COVID, and to see what impact it has as a form of treatment. There are studies going back to 2020 and meta-analysis of multiple studies going back to 2020 looking at the positive impact that ivermectin has on people who have contracted COVID. The latest studies are showing an 80% reduction in replication, because it stops the COVID virus from being able to absorb particular proteins, and so it can't replicate. If it transpires that ivermectin had a very positive impact on people who had contracted COVID and were suffering from COVID and had the effects of COVID, if it transpires that certain scientists, or at least that information was freely and widely available in 2020 and was ignored, how do you think society should respond to things like that? Because it is starting to look like.
I think it will be exposed, because it is the case. And I think it is criminally irresponsible to have this information. I mean, NPHET went the first 12 months of this crisis denying that vitamin D supplements, for example, could have any role in helping the immune system in this. I think last March, they reluctantly accepted that it may have some role. But it took them a year, something that the rest of the world knew and no dispute about the matter. So these are methods which keep people out of hospitals, which wouldn't have contributed to remember the famous curve we were waiting on, but they haven't done it. And ivermectin, a proven award-winning procedure or medication, if you like, which is effective. We've seen it in India, we've seen it in Japan, I think, significantly, and elsewhere.
And are we seeing it? Maybe it'd be interesting to find out now what the outcome of its use in the 5 major Irish hospitals. I think the Mater Hospital was one of those hospitals, just to see if we're allowed to know, if the information's allowed. So it was a part of a wider study, I believe, starting on November 5th. So if we're allowed to find out what the outcome of those Irish hospital-specific studies into ivermectin were, because to me, a lot of this is starting to appear criminal. And one of my concerns is, I've heard people calling for a public inquiry into X, Y, and Z. One of my concerns is that a public inquiry can in itself limit the potential for criminal proceedings into the future against individuals, as for instance, criminal negligence proceedings into the future against individuals who are making decisions at the moment, for instance, transferring COVID positive patients into nursing homes, potentially denying people either the knowledge about and in fact access to ivermectin. And you know what, the media are involved in it, as well as the state, as well as NPHET. How do you feel about the idea of a public inquiry versus criminal proceedings, now that you mentioned criminality earlier?
I do think that the option to have criminal proceedings has to be kept, because isn't this one of the things we're missing in Irish society for a long time? And that is accountability, that public servants are doing things and it seems to be sufficient if they're proven to be wrong, that they can simply say sorry and move on. And despite maybe having wasted millions and millions in public money, or despite having cost actual lives, or having made people ill, which is the case, and they just carry on. And I hate reducing things to individuals, but we have a chief medical officer who tried to cover up the scandal regarding the cervical cancer smears and so on. And no accountability, and people have died, and more will die. So,
and also, I believe was important in a campaign to stop an investigation into disappearance of blood samples during an investigation into an aluminium plant in the Midlands. So he's a man that is steeped in controversy. So I don't think you're personalized. Sometimes things do come down to individuals, you know, and it does have to be named as well. Yeah. One final question to you, and I hope to be speaking to you almost on a weekly basis as the campaign builds up, so that people, our viewers and people who follow the show and follow Compass Media can keep a tab on exactly what's happening and get involved. There are hundreds of thousands of people across the country, vaccinated and unvaccinated, who at this moment have said enough is enough. I need to get involved. I need to do something. I don't want my kids to be vaccinated. I don't want to be pressurized into multiple more vaccines that seem to not be what we used to think vaccines were. Can we instill some kind of faith in them this evening that into the new year, they may not be able to do something, get involved themselves this week or next week when there are events happening, but at least into the new year, that there is work going on behind the scenes to build a campaign that they will be able to get involved in, both locally and at a national level, by getting into Dublin en masse again?
Yeah, I mean, there has been an amount of work done by an awful lot of people in order to build a campaign, you know, which has some vision and has some clarity about it and direction, and which is actually organized. So our latest element in that, if you like, is to finally have a website online, which is online now. Its functionality will be growing. And what we're trying to do is ask people to sign on to the campaign at civilrights.ie. There's a simple form to fill in there, and doing so will keep people in the loop. They will be in contact. And what we want to do is encourage groups to establish themselves in every county at minimum and every townland, so as that at public activities, we need to see people standing up in the public realm and declaring that enough is enough. We must stop this nonsense going ahead. We need proper healthcare. We need to have honest media. We need honest governance in this country, and we don't have it. So I think the key to stopping this outright attack on our most fundamental rights is the people. It is only the people will stop it. If we fail to stop it, then the consequences, I believe, are very severe. We need only look at what's going on in Italy or in Australia. And in fact, matters under debate in Leinster House at the moment are the ability of the state to appoint health officers who can detain people who they suspect are potential carriers of a virus. A potential. Like, so, as you can imagine, every human being alive is a potential carrier of virus. So they want it to enact arbitrary powers of arrest and detention.
Detain them where? So are they going to be detained somewhere en masse?
The drafts that we've seen, and apparently a lot of TDs haven't even seen the final draft of this legislation, drafted mentions hospitals, but or other locations, it says. So this could be anywhere. And to be detained until this health officer decides somebody is no longer a danger to the public. I mean, it is arbitrary. It's a little bit like internment. This is what is before us if we accept it. But I don't believe for 1 minute that the Irish people will accept this. And the mood at the moment certainly is that people have had enough. I suppose people have been wishing for the last year and a bit that this is going to go away. Look, we'll get through it. We know we've flattened the curve. You know, the vaccines will come, it'll clear things up. But it hasn't cleared up anything. and it's getting worse. Even the mortality figures and the case counts are even going up, despite the fact that most of the population are vaccinated. So logic is gone, science has gone out the door, and we need to level our heads. We need to build this campaign. And the other thing we can't do is we can't just be a spontaneous movement. We need to do this thing in a methodological manner, step by step. We need to establish contacts around the country. People who have experience can help people get over the hump of what to do, how to do it, etc. And let's start having the public, like I know already there's a lot of townlands go out every Monday at either 3 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon and simply stand holding placards, but it's visual and it's getting the message out there. We need to be in the public realm as much as possible on this issue. And eventually we need to flood the capital city of our country with people until the government relents.
Isn't it important, I think, that people don't get bogged down and get drawn into side shows? So for instance, I've seen quite often this being called a communist takeover and a communist conspiracy. And I think anybody who knows anything about communism knows that it's where workers take control of the means of production, and that's certainly not what's going on here. In fact, quite the opposite. It would appear that certain corporations are taking control of the state in every way. So in fact, it's Mussolini's form of fascism. But isn't it important that any movement, because I would have known you to be left of centre in the past, I suppose, in many ways, and very respectful of everybody's opinion. I would have considered myself left of centre, definitely, in the past. I would have thought that any major battle into the future would have had left-right economic elements for myself and for yourself potentially. But it's looking like the battle is something that transcends all of that. Transcends race, transcends economic ideology, and it's just about access to facts and truth and the freedom to express yourself. That's how essential this is at the moment.
Yeah. So we have, especially as we activated ourselves in Cork 12 months ago, we have been trying to establish that as the way of the campaign, that we're not ideologically based. We don't look to conspiracy theories. Whether they're true or not isn't the point. We want to look at the issue of truth and the issue of rights and like informed consent. All of these things, these are fundamental rights. We don't need to go further than that. And like people talk about communist China and stuff, not realizing the industry in China is owned by Wall Street anyway. Like, so who is who? All this label putting on things, it's nothing, it's divisive. So we have to have confidence in our own position, which is we have fundamental human rights, we have the right to informed consent, and we're entitled to a society based on truth. It's a simple concept, but very powerful. And the stark fact is we don't get that. So this is what we have to have. If we have these things, the people are more than capable of working it out for themselves, what way and what direction and how we build our society. But it must be based on truth. If it's not, then some very vested interest somewhere will be controlling it. So this is what we're doing. We're trying to...
It's a battle, I think it's a battle for society itself, and it really is a battle for the future. And quite often people are exaggerating when they use that kind of language. But I think what we're witnessing now, even for the people who've been more willing to expect the worst from the state in the past, I think even they're getting surprised by what's happening right now. Let's talk about one more time how people can get involved. What's happening on Friday and Saturday for a start?
On Friday, people are asked to bring their families, take a day off work, get to Leinster House, to the Merrion Square side of Leinster House. There's more space there. Initially, we thought Kildare Street, but it's too small. It has to be at Merrion Square. That's 12 o'clock tomorrow in Dublin. Get there. I'll be attending myself. There's a whole lot of people I know from Cork who are making the trip because people are angry, and we want to get people to funnel that anger into positive energy, not just lashing out. We need to be positive all the time. So that's Friday, tomorrow. On Saturday in Cork, we had already scheduled, and there is another rally for truth and for civil rights. So there'll be a march assembling at Bishop Lucy Park on Grand Parade in Cork City at 12 o'clock. It's an earlier than normal time. And it's earlier because there was a request some weeks ago from Australia for expressions of solidarity with what's happening, in particular in the state of Victoria, where these powers of arrest and detention are being pushed through as well. So we will have that tomorrow or on Saturday in Cork, and people are invited to come to Cork for that event, join in. And I know then the following, on the 9th, I think it's the following Wednesday, in Drogheda, there is another one of these media events being organised by the campaign at LMFM radio station. So I'm actually going to go and attend that as well. So there's lots happening, and countless interventions outside schools. So to get in touch with the campaign again, it's civilrights.ie on the web, civilrights.ie, or if people are searching on the highly controlled and censored Facebook, one could search for facebook.com/campaign for truth, numeric 4, campaign for truth.
Okay, and what we'll do is we'll put that down in the comment box and anywhere that we're hosting this interview.
Yeah. So we're optimistic. It's an unpleasant time to be in, to be honest with you. I'm sure we'd all prefer to do other things, you know, at this time of life and this time of the year especially. But, you know, I'm optimistic. People are responding and people have had enough. So we'll do what we can, and everyone needs to do what they can. And when we all do that together, we'll win. We will definitely win. There is no question about it.
And just for people who maybe need to pre-plan things a little bit more, but are really guaranteeing themselves that they're going to get involved into the new year, if they can't get to whatever's happening on Friday and Saturday and next Wednesday in Drogheda, there will definitely be events occurring into the new year at a mass level, and that they will be able to participate in what appears to is going to be a historic movement and moment in Irish history.
Yeah, there will indeed be more mass mobilisations, and hopefully in all the centres around Ireland, but obviously in Dublin City as well, Dublin being the capital for the moment, until we folks down in Cork reassert things.
Oh, don't be divisive. I thought you said that you wouldn't want to be divisive. Okay, Diarmuid O'Call, I'm really happy that you joined us this evening. Yeah, have agreed to come on every so often and have a chat to update our viewers and people who are following 𝐸mpass Media on what's going on, and just to keep people lifted, because I know it's very difficult and it's tough times. It's tough times for parents, for children, and just to be somebody who believes in bodily integrity, but also in not being a cash cow for the pharmaceutical industry, and not being happy to live in a country in which conglomerates like the pharmaceutical industry can dictate every aspect of our personal lives through government and through policing, which is essentially what's happening. Diarmuid, thanks for joining us. We'll chat to you very soon.
Thank you, Finbar.